No call is a warm call, ever. Every call is a cold call. What is a cold call? A cold call is any phone call that's made that's somewhat unexpected. It's a cold call, right? And the cold call is one of the most dreaded parts of sales. I mean, if you were to take surveys, across every part of the world, I can almost guarantee you that every salesperson would agree that the worst part of any sales job is having to do cold calls. And why is that? It's because people segment regular phone calls from cold calls, and they, segment it out, and they make it, they convince themselves that cold calls are something unique and different and scary, and you're trying to sell people something and they're gonna find you out, and then they're gonna make fun of you and yell at you, all these crazy imaginative things that go through our minds. There's a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. I think it's by Dale Carnegie, I'm not sure, I forget. How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And one of the most important components in this book is mapping out the worst case scenario and realizing that it's usually not as bad as you thought it was. So this book kind of breaks down how to catch yourself whenever you start going down a train of thought that isn't necessarily rational. And it's really effective for people who are in sales and who are taking a lot of risk in their lives, especially entrepreneurs and business owners and investors, because it helps you become aware of what your predispositions are, your thinking patterns, and allows you to kind of stop them before they stop you. So I start off this video saying that, no call is a cold call, because I think that it's easy to, if you segment regular phone calls from cold calls in sales, what you do is you think, once the cold call was made, now it's a warm call. Oh my God, it's going to be so much easier from here on, following up with the customer, seeing the customer through multiple appointments, and closing big deals. Once that first cold call is made, everything else is warm because they know who I am. And that's not the case. That is not the case, especially if you have a really long sales cycle and perhaps you went on vacation and come back and expect all the people that you met with 3 weeks ago to just pick up the phone and allow you to have a second meeting with them to go over more details of whatever it is you're selling in a B2B environment. It's not that easy. It's definitely not that easy. And all cold calls should be treated as cold calls. So start thinking of a cold call as this. A cold call is any phone call that the person on the other end is not expecting and or may be like somewhat avoiding or negatively anticipating. A warm call, and I know this is not necessarily the Webster dictionary definition, a warm call you should start thinking of as something where someone has expressed interest and is still expressing interest, and the call is warm because they are receptive to you, and they were waiting to hear from you with a positive anticipation. Everything else needs to be treated as a cold call. So what do you do when you're making a cold call? Well, there's always going to be 4 tenets, right? There's always going to be the introduction or greeting, then stating the reason for your call, and then qualifying, asking some questions to open up your prospect, and then finally ending with the appointment set. And then obviously there's follow-up steps beyond that, including it depends on what business industry you're in, but the next is secondary qualifying. Then you can dive into the lock close. There's a couple other ancillary benefits, ancillary parts to the cold call that can be thrown in depending on your industry. But regardless, following the framework of a cold call is pretty essential for you to do for every phone call, even the ones that you would have deemed as warm. So what's that mean? If you're trying to build value in the marketplace and continue building value, you need new reasons to call, right? To call people and to continue building their interest. If you don't have a reason to call someone, they will see right through it, right? So treat your so-called warm calls as cold calls from now on, and I guarantee you won't regret it. Because that little bit of anxiety, that fear that goes through your stomach when you make a phone call, that feeling is there for a reason. Never get comfortable when you're making cold calls, even if they're follow-up calls or so-called warm calls. Don't get too confident, because maybe they lost interest. Maybe they need another reason to gain interest in your program, your product, your service. So treat all calls as cold calls and handle them with the intensity that you would on a brand new phone call to a company, business owner, or really anyone that's never heard of you before. Enjoy, guys.